how does Gen AI affect IR and cloud IR, your field?
This newer concept that is coming out is the agents, right? AI agents. It goes from everything of once a detection happens, it triggers the agent. It pulls back the forensic artifact. It cross-correlates a lot of the logs in the environment, regardless of the image itself, but it's pulling back some of those IOCs, right? And then towards the end, it's creating this timeline for an analyst to go through and analyze. AI is not here to take my job, at least quite yet. There definitely needs to be a human in the mix to verify and then perform the remediation efforts, right? It's always a trust and then verify.
O3C Cybersecurity Podcast.
O3 Cybersecurity Podcast. We are back. Today we are talking about cloud incident response. So we've been through the cloud threat landscape. We've been through cloud threat detection. We have talked about how to protect your cloud. We've talked about more management level stuff. So today we're trying to dive a bit into the bits and bytes of how to respond when shit has hit the fan. For today's episode, I have Olav back with me. Welcome, Olav.
Nice to be back, Håkon. Thank you.
You know, when we're doing incident response, I needed the most technical guy in O3C to co-chair this podcast with me.
Of course, that's what I do. That's my expertise, so I fully understand you back on that one, Håkon.
And when we decided to do an episode on incident response in the cloud, I was thinking, who can I invite on? Who's a guy I know that's really, really talented and good at this stuff. I remembered a few years back, I attended a Forward CloudSec in Anaheim in California with Karim. And there we met today's guest. So thank you for being on, Noah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate you having me here today. I'm excited to talk about cloud incident response and, educate those that need it the most.
It's the pleasure is ours, to say the least. So, Noah, you have a very, very interesting resume. First of all, what do you do today? Where do you work?
Yeah, today I work at Google Cloud. I am on the security side of things. I consult, so I go from clients, the top 100 Fortune companies, and I teach them how to do incident response in the cloud using Google SecOps, Security Command Center, writing detections for them, and then also deploying scenarios and simulations in their environment that replicate an attacker in the real world.
Very interesting, and sounds very relevant for what we're talking about today. So that's like technical stuff you need to be an expert to do. How did you end up in that role? What's your background? Where did you go to school? What was your first role in cyber and so on?
Yeah, so I went to school in a small university. It's Utica. It used to be part of Syracuse up in upstate New York. I studied cybersecurity operations, so I was in the operations of warfare. And then through that, a lot of my professors were already in the industry, right? A lot of them worked at the NSA, the FBI, currently as they were teaching. And my first role was actually doing social engineering. So I'd walk into different banks and I'd try to get into the networking closet and deploy malware. And through that, I just knew I was hooked, right? So on the offsides, that I'd be involved with my roommates and testing different malwares and trying to sell it. And then I realized that the red teaming wasn't really my cup of tea. I met some people who did forensics, and that's when I got introduced to a partner at Ernst & Young. When I worked at Ernst & Young, I did digital forensics, and mostly that evolved around intellectual property theft. So when a person at a company left the company and stole some information, I'd be the one who'd come knocking at their door, collect their mobile device, their computer, anything that was electronic, and do forensics against it. So that spanned from everything from mobile to host forensics. And then from there, I really wanted to do incident response because I thought it was a lot more fast-paced, and I wanted to see the ransomware, and I wanted to work with these threat actors. And I did a little bit of that over at Ernst & Young before moving over to Unit 42 at Palo Alto Networks. When I was over at Unit 42, this is where I was going from everything from proxy shell. We'd be the first ones to study and write the documentation on it, to Log4j. And any of the supply chain attacks, we were there for it. I'd also do threat actor negotiations, but really I was there to do the incident response, find out what happened, find out what was stolen, and then get them back online as fast as possible. From there, I repositioned into this cloud. I saw early on that cloud was becoming prevalent in our industry, and a lot of companies were migrating over to it. That's when I took on a leadership role at Palo Alto, where I was leading cloud incident response. We do everything from Google Cloud Incident Response, which was my first cloud provider that I learned, but we had no cases for it. And then we'd go over to AWS and Azure, where a bulk of our cases came. And we saw some pretty interesting cases, from anything from NFT theft to the simple crypto mining to MongoDB database, ransomware. And then after a certain point, I got the opportunity to work at the cloud provider itself and do something similar, but teach those who are new to Google Cloud or have been in Google Cloud for a while but are unsure how to do incident response. So today, that's where it kind of leaves me, of working with these Fortune 100 companies, of teaching them how to do cloud incident response, writing, helping them write detections and playbooks to figure out what happened in their cloud environment. And that can span outside of Google Cloud too, right? We work multi-cloud. So, spanning Azure, AWS, and even on-prem, and figuring out what happened.
That's very cool. In honor of you being on the pod, I took on my Google Cloud Certified Security Engineer half sip today. So we're ready to dive into the details. And I think you're very well equipped to speak to what we're speaking about. And it's really interesting that you kind of chose to go towards the enabling others to do cloud incident response, like to actually scale the effort, because at least in my experience, that cloud incident response, cloud threat detection space is not, or like getting talent in that space is really, really hard for most organizations. So we've said cloud incident response a bunch, but we haven't really gone into what does that mean, what does that entail. So for you, Noah, what is cloud incident response?
Yeah, cloud incident response, just like traditional incident response, is the method of addressing security threats in your environment. It involves everything from detection, assessment, containment, and then the recovery portion of it. It's really figuring out what happened during a breach, right? Identifying exactly what happened and solving for it. We're really looking for how it happened, what was the impact, how it could be prevented from further spreading, and then how it could be prevented in the future.
I guess since we're in the cloud, like log sources and evidence and all that stuff differs quite a bit from on-premise. But what's the biggest difference for you, having done both?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of differences. I think one of them is the shared responsibility model. So when you're in the cloud environment, you are sharing the responsibility where the cloud provider is the owner of the cloud itself. Its involvement is securing the cloud, but then anything that is put in the cloud, anything that is your infrastructure, anything that is built, is on the consumer or the company that is putting it in there. So it has a shared fate model. I think there's some good articles around there from Anton and Wiz out there that talk about it. I think the other thing that is really different is the dynamic value of the cloud, right? It's meant to scale up, down, sideways, and can make things pretty difficult to keep track of. Kubernetes is a great example of this, given that a lot of things are ephemeral. So when it comes to forensics, it's hard to capture the right things at the right time before it's deleted.
And you say something very interesting there, Noah. Because first you say shared responsibility model, and then you say shared faith model. You want to dive into what the shared faith model is compared to the shared responsibility model. I really love that Google is championing this kind of shift in paradigm.
Yeah, the shared fate is, really it comes down to, we are here to help you, right? So we want you as a customer to succeed. So if there's a problem happening on your side, we're more than willing to help you solve for what that is within bounds, right? So we're sharing the fate that we all become successful at the end of the day. That's how it really differs between the shared responsibility that you see, not only Google Cloud, but other cloud providers as well, where they draw the line of like, hey, we're securing the cloud itself, and you got to own what you put in the cloud, and it's on you guys to figure out what happened and secure that.
This is like, it's almost a rhetorical question, and there's probably no like right or wrong answer, but would you say it's harder to do incident response in the cloud after you know the cloud, or is it easier than doing incident response for like big Active Directory on-premise environments?
Yeah, I guess it depends, right? It depends on the background that you come from and what you excel at. I think performing cloud incident response, you have to be good at doing log forensics. You will find that knowing traditional incident response does have a role in the cloud. Many times you see threat actors will leverage compute instances or databases of some sort as part of their operation or attack path. This means at some point you'll have to pull back the image of a host or a database logs and perform forensics on them, which you do. Now, one thing that does make cloud forensics a little bit harder is the elasticity of the resources in the environment. I have cases where I see compute instances being leveraged by threat actors, and when I go to find that instance to pull back a snapshot for forensics, it's no longer there because it was part of an auto-scaling managed instance group. But one thing that makes it easier is the collection of the data and the resources itself. Since everything is in the cloud, it's almost a single pane of glass to collect all the forensics evidence at once rather than deploying an EDR or an XDR agent or even physically being there to collect the evidence.
Yeah, because I've never done incident response for a living as a job, but I've been lightly involved when incidents has happened and seen like a provider come in and then they're like the first thing they have to do is roll out EDR to the entire fleet because they had no coverage. And just rolling out EDR to 5,000 endpoints is a project in itself, and then you're doing incident response. So I guess that's the upside of the being in the cloud. How do you think this fits into what we've talked about earlier with the cloud delivery model and aligning this with business processes? Is it easier? Is it harder to have this designed into the life cycle of a digital system, of a product when it's cloud-based?
It most certainly it makes it easier, right? Although a lot of companies don't think about that way. When they're in the cloud, they want to scale up and fast as possible, right? And so oftentimes security takes the back seat. But you do have this method of deploying things a lot faster and baking these golden images and having these processes where you can deploy the security agents. But I'll hand it back over to Olaf. Sorry about that.
I was just thinking of a question. I would also guess that it's easier to automate a lot of the incident results. So let's say you have a detection on a VM or a container or whatever. I guess you could also, with different tools, automate the snapshot of that container or VM ready for like investigation by an incident response team also. So that happens on the fly when something is detected. Is that something you see, or is that like a high maturity environment, so to say?
Yeah, and it's kind of an interesting question that you have there, because you do see a lot more mature companies adopt that, and more of those, what we call in the Google Cloud greenfield, ones that are newer to the cloud, don't adopt this fashion of integrating and differentiating between what you're taking the snapshot back and doing the forensics against it. But we oftentimes get surprised by those technical customers that have deployed these things already, cloud first.
Yeah, because I was just thinking in a simple example where a VM has been infected by some malware and that has been detected by a tool. I would guess that you could also then just take the snapshot on the fly, make it available for the incident response team, or if that's internal, external, for them to like do their investigation and to confirm that this is correct, this is malware, do X, Y, Z, or if they do it or whatever. Compared to maybe on-prem where
people have to come with
someone like call you and say, hey, can you come here to my data center, pull out the disk, scan it, and figure out that's the question, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, and I think that tools are now evolving. I mean, speaking back on my past experience at working at Palo Alto, right, you have XDR, which can take on-the-fly triage assessments of instances without actually physically being there. So it's kind of the similar point that you made of when a malware is detected, can you take a snapshot or capture some relevant forensic artifacts on the fly? You can do that with tools on-prem nowadays. What I think is a little bit different is you can do this in a more automated fashion within the cloud, right? Where you can have these triggers saying like, hey, if this IOC or if this, binary appears, take the snapshot and throw it in an evidence locker ready for analysis. The other part of that is with the cloud, you can automatically analyze a lot of these snapshots and pull out a lot of the triaging and cross correlation between logs to the image on the fly without having the hands-on.
I just need to shoot in a question, Noah, and I know it's from the left field, but you work in Google. Google
Mhm.
is like on the bleeding edge, the frontier of the AI revolution with the Gemini models, etc. So just hit me right now. How does Gen AI affect IR and cloud IR, your field?
Yeah. So there's a lot of new things that are coming out. I mean, I was over at Cloud Next a couple weeks ago over in Las Vegas, and we introduced a lot of new things. I think what's really interesting is the different areas in which AI is playing a role in incident response. One of those being, more of the detection engineering when you're looking at the AI writing rules for you in your sim and SOAR. Also, describing and pulling back the log and explaining it to you, right? So you may not need to be an expert in every type of log source. AI is helping you explain what you're actually looking at. The other part of that thing is, this newer concept that is coming out is the agents, right? AI agents. And I think that's a really cool thing that Google Cloud has demoed out to the broader is showing how we have an AI agent that performs this incident response. So it goes from everything of once a detection happens, it triggers the agent, it pulls back the forensic artifact, it cross correlates a lot of the logs in the environment, regardless of the image itself, but it's pulling back some of those IOCs, right? And then towards the end, it's creating this timeline for an analyst to go through and analyze. Now, there is the options to auto remediate, whether it's a service account key or an instance and removing those, right? Oftentimes, we like those, right? It's been part of the SOAR world for a while, but it's dangerous, right? If you're in a production environment and this happens and all of a sudden you're removing an instance or a service account, it could break a lot of things.
So sounds like where we're at now, we can use Gen AI, we can use agents, but we still need a human in the loop with like the deep level expertise and also someone who can take on the responsibility of doing these destructive actions in an incident response phase.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm saying AI is not here to take my job at least quite yet. There definitely needs to be a human in the module or in the mix to verify and then perform the remediation efforts, right? It's always a trust and then verify.
Definitely. When you're doing incident response, and this is both in the cloud and on premise, you're on the bleeding edge of what the threat actors are capable of. This is probably where we can get the most valuable information on how to build robust and resilient systems. So how are you seeing that the threat landscape is evolving in terms of cloud? And how can someone, be it a threat detection engineer or a security engineer, stay up to date on the threat landscape?
Yeah, I'm gonna take your latter question first. So the first thing is, I think regardless of if you're in incident response, if you're in the security industry, things are always changing. Things are evolving day to day, right? I read a ton of blogs. I mean, there are a lot of great companies out there putting a lot of great content out. I'm honestly going to plug the 4CloudSec Slack channel. There's a lot of great researchers and writers in there that push a lot of great content. But on the flip side of that, working at Google Cloud, I have these channels where I can work with our threat intelligence teams, our research teams, our cloud research teams, and then also, just being in the position I am in, I can see a lot of these new things happening in the environment. One of the things that I like to do is, and in conjunction with other teams, is try to find these Telegram channels and actually embed myself into these threat actor groups, right? It takes a little bit of OPSEC, right? But it's worthwhile seeing, what is actually happening today, not learning tomorrow what happened today, right? That's what's really getting me the little edge. Now, moving on to your second question of, how are threat actors, developing towards the cloud? I think we've seen a lot of the same things, right? I think threat actors are kind of on the same front of what the security side is still learning what they can do in the cloud and how they can do it. And I think much of what we're seeing is around exploitation of misconfigured cloud infrastructure, but also overprivileged service accounts. Oftentimes when I teach people, how does an actual incident occur in the cloud, I break it down into 3 different buckets. One of those is misconfiguration. We've seen this 56% of all incidents, year over year is always around misconfiguration. The other thing is credential leakage. We see this through open source repositories that contain this, which can easily be remediated through like an open source tool like Trufflehug, right? But also even applications that are public that don't have credentials, we see an issue. And then the final third bucket is that OWASP top 10, where it's a little bit lower level, where you can scan for the infrastructure, and then there's no model on the customer side to detect and prevent these things beforehand. So we see a lot of threat actors coming in and just doing a cross-site script or a SQL injection. And that's very prevalent in the cloud, right? If you have an application hosted on a compute instance or even a Kubernetes cluster, leveraging one of those OAuth top 10 to pull credentials against the metadata servers fairly easily, right?
So I'm a bit surprised because we see a lot of cloud environments, some really good and strong and well protected, some on the other side of the scale, I would say. But I'm sometimes surprised why we haven't seen big successful attacks of cloud environments, at least in Europe or Scandinavia, as I'm aware of. There might be in the US, I'm not following the US that close. I guess it also tells me something what you said now, is that maybe the threat actors themselves don't always know how to use the foothold they have. Maybe for them, if they get the foothold in a VM or whatever, they don't recognize the difference between a VM virtual machine on-prem and a virtual machine in the cloud, and then how they can interconnect or further go into the environment from that. Do you see a lot of different threat actors, some that are not so cloud conscious, not so skilled, doing like the on-prem playbook in cloud? Or do you also see a lot of those threat actors being super skilled in cloud and scaling the attack on a whole different level?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we have a wide, at Google, we see a wide variety from everything from the lower level script kiddies over to APT groups. A lot of that is just like the scanning and automated of script pushing and trying to just deploy and execute, those automated scripts. But then, occasionally we get these APT groups that are more skilled that either focus solely on the cloud or leverage themselves onto the cloud through on-prem. And we see this big issue, and we had this era that started a couple years ago around cookie theft, right? And I think Google is trying to solve this through our rapid cookie rotation, right? But really what this is once you compromise on-prem, using the browser to exfiltrate the cookies and then leverage those to laterally move into the cloud environment. So we oftentimes do see those, but we see an exchange of threat actors. We see the access broker, and this is similar to on-prem as well, right? We have these access brokers that gain the access into the cloud provider themselves and then sell off the credential access over to these more sophisticated groups that will then perform the activity. Now, a lot of the threat actors that we're looking at are financially motivated. I mean, if we look at just this year alone, we have 6 ginormous cases that have been public in the eye, across not only the US, but even over in Europe and APAC, where we see hundreds, if not billions, of user data that is being exfiltrated from databases or cloud storage buckets. But also, we're looking at more of these groups that are trending towards, the tools that rely on the cloud. So, for instance, something that has really been coming up lately is using the Docker API to leverage different malware groups and worms to nestle themselves into the environment. Now, alongside that, we see a couple different things happen, right? Sure, we deploy this more sophisticated malware, we deploy the crypto miner, but we're also doing some things on the side. So it's almost like a dual motivation to deploy the crypto miner for short-term gain, and then wait for that long-term game of exfiltrating out data or leveraging the cloud environment that has been infiltrated as their own to attack other environments.
So what you're saying is you're seeing the full specter of threat actors, from like the opportunistic actor that ends up compromising something in the cloud and treats it like any computing node, and then to threat actors that maybe buy compromised cloud environments and have like a twofold attack where they do the short term and long term, and maybe even leverage that infrastructure for further attacks against other cloud hosted systems.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a large spread of what we're seeing in the cloud environments, everything from the lower level to the APT groups.
You touched upon the actors that use let's say, cloud native APIs in their attacks. And we have talked about it previously, and this question is kind of based on, was it a white paper? Yeah, probably. I read a couple of years ago about what we were talking about earlier, collecting forensics evidence automatically in the cloud. So what we often see is that the cloud or the security team in organizations are not really leveraging the upside of cloud computing. They could automate their own work or some of the grunt work. They could be more efficient if they used cloud services better. How, beyond what we've already touched upon, how can the IR team leverage cloud services to be more efficient, to deliver more value for the business?
Absolutely. Yeah. What I want to say is like, when I first started performing cloud incident response, there were many tools out there to assist with analysis and forensic in the cloud. Sure, there are many tools out there now that can assist with making incident response more efficient. We have Gem that was recently adopted by Wiz that helps with this. We also have Cato that went over to Darknet that helps with this. But before all of that, you could definitely use some of the services that the cloud provider provides you, and that gets you a long way. For instance, a great example is performing log analysis. You can do this right into the services that the cloud provider provides, such as BigQuery, Athena, Graph, for performing threat hunting and log analysis across all of your logs. You can also do this on-prem, but leveraging managed Jupyter Notebooks instances in the cloud provider themselves to write these playbooks that automatically have a lot of these cross-correlation and log analysis queries in there, so that once you load up the notebook and ingest your logs, it's already running through and iterating and trying to find results in cross-correlation. Now, the other thing that you're talking about is snapshotting. We talked about that a little earlier on. We can do a lot of this through the cloud natives, through either a cloud run or a cloud function, and then the same thing over in AWS, right? Where we can automate the triggers of things. So when we get the trigger from, let's say, Security Command Center or AWS Guard Duty, right? Feeding that over to a pub sub or similar in AWS, and then based off that pub sub, if it matches, trigger this cloud run to pull back a snapshot and store it in a bucket for a user to perform analysis. Now, the analysis part of things becomes a little bit more difficult to automate using the cloud service provider resources. I think that's where either a user needs to step in, or maybe a more complex company would write an automated tool to parse the image itself. Not saying that can't be done, it has been done, but it's just a little bit more effort, whereas a tool would make that a lot more easier for you.
Olaf, you often come in as a security manager, cloud security transformation manager, whatever. How can I transform my team to be able to do a lot of the things that Noah are talking about? How can we get to a place where the security team is skilled enough to handle incidents in the cloud, but also use the cloud to handle those incidents?
I think it always falls back to like investing in the people you have internally. They need to have enough time and to learn the cloud. If they are super busy protecting the on-prem environment, they don't have a chance about learning cloud. They don't have a chance about shifting left and helping the cloud team build security systems in the cloud either. So yeah, it's also a bit about understanding and have your cloud operations model, I think. Truly understanding who is responsible for what and doing what. Usually I see that slipping within shares quite often. So yeah, just doing it seriously from day one, I would say, to sum it up. And for those who want the details, check out the episode with Rami, maybe. Is that good enough, Håkon?
Yeah, but if something's worth mentioning once, it's often worth mentioning more times. That's so it's fair. But turning the same question to you, Noah, how do we get to a place where our security team can handle incidents in the cloud and can use the cloud to handle incidents in the cloud? That's I think that's part of what you do for a job. So
when I first got started in this industry, there weren't a lot of things that taught how to do cloud incident response. I think that's why I got in the role that I am in now, and why I publish some of the things that I do, is to teach those that on this, very niche thing in the market, right? The first thing that I would recommend anybody do is, if you're not familiar with a cloud provider, it doesn't matter which cloud provider, pick one of the major three and just start exploring it, right? A lot of the cloud providers provide you these free credits to just poke around. Really familiarizing yourself with the cloud environment and what different APIs do, what logs are being generated from these will get you a long way. From there, you can start, testing, reading some of these blogs. You could test some of these CVEs or these exploits, right? And seeing what logs are being generated from there and start thinking about, what detections and methods of doing incident response can get you. Now, when you start looking about how to automate a lot of this incident response, I think focus on that first step for a while. Practice and then teach it to somebody else so it really just gets drilled into your head and solidifies with you. From there, start leveraging stuff like Jupyter Notebooks, right? Set up your own Jupyter Hub and start trying to parse these logs. From there, try to build a Cloud Run and a pub sub so that you can do these automated snapshotting these instances and pulling them back. And I think from there, it's really just honing in on things. It's nailing down your detections. It's trying to figure out how to cross-correlate data better. The other thing is there are a lot of different services in the cloud. You're not going to know them all. Try to pick the top ones that your company uses, whether that's compute, GCS or S3, right? Something similar, and just start familiarizing yourself with those because those are the ones that are likely going to pop up in the event of an incident.
I think we're getting closer and closer to like the definitive answer because we asked Rami McCarthy about a similar thing. We asked Anya from DNB, Norway's biggest bank. We asked James Berthauti from Latio Tech, like a similar question. And everyone is saying the same thing as you, Noah. Like, go build in the cloud, understand it from kind of the engineering perspective, the builder's perspective, and then just go read the logs and get familiar with them, and then go from there. So I think for anyone listening to this podcast who wants to get into cloud security, when 3 or 4 of the most talented people in the industry is saying the same thing, you should probably go and do what they say.
I have a question. So I guess in your line of work, you also work with some MDR and SOC providers, I would guess, from some of those Fortune 100 companies. How do you see those MDR providers? Are they getting also more skill to do cloud threat detection and response, or are they still mainly doing like server and computer threat detection identities and more of the, let's call it the basic stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's a fine line to walk, right? These MDRs are getting better at what they do, right? They are writing detections. They are hiring people just with the specialization of cloud. That also works in a different, shared responsibility model, just kind of like what the cloud provider does. A lot of what I see with these MDRs is they will host a portion of, the actual tooling around performing cloud incident response. They'll help with the detection. They'll help with more like the tier 1, tier 2 SOC analysis stuff, and then they'll push it over onto the client to help. And I think that's okay. But I think they're getting there, right? We are partnered with a lot of those people, and I'm sure they're partnered with other cloud providers as well. So they have the means to gather as much knowledge as possible from the cloud providers themselves. I haven't worked with them in a little bit, but yeah, there's some great ones out there, right? Expel, SOC Prime, they're doing great work. They know what they're talking about. We see the articles that they're posting. They're giving out great content, and I think that they're hiring the right people.
Yeah, because I would guess it's hard for a SOC analyst to know everything as well, right? To do that for an on-prem environment, for a machine, for a server, for a cloud, from serverless to understanding. It's either you need to have a quite big MDR provider, I would guess, with different specialties, and then of course you need to pay to get that high quality service, or you kind of need to just admit that, okay, my MDR or SOC provider, they mainly do X, Y, and Z, and for the cloud environment, I need to take care of that myself. It's my guess or take on it, I think. Håkon?
Yeah, no. I think the cloud is getting more and more prevalent, so the MDR providers has to get better. We also see better both open source and commercial tooling that they can build on top of. And the major CSPs, and we mainly work with Google, AWS, and Microsoft, right? Their logging capabilities are getting better and better, and especially I would I would say that Microsoft had some gaps previously, and then like it got better. So I think both the providers, or all levels of providers, are getting better. But it is, as has been discussed on this podcast previously, is that often cloud threat detection is very dependent on the application itself. So that means the SOC needs to know a lot more about application security and then cloud infrastructure security. And then it gets very complex for someone who's maybe working in the middle of the night while they are studying the basics and learning about confidentiality, integrity, and availability during the day. So definitely a hard space, but probably getting better. I feel this episode has been very informational, very exciting, and I want to take the chance to ask you, Noah, what would you say is the best part of your job? What do you enjoy the most about being a cloud incident responder, security consultant?
Yeah, this job is unlike most. I think the reason I like incident response, actually, the reason I love incident response is you learn on this job faster than you could anywhere, right? You're always thrown into new situations, new environments, working with different threat actors. Like we talked about a lot in this podcast, right? Cloud is on the bleeding edge. Everything is ever evolving and changing. You have to stay up to date. You're always learning different things. And that just makes you, more valuable in the market itself.
Olav, you rarely get to speak to people as talented as Noah, because you have to talk with me and Karim every day. So this is your opportunity to ask him a question, or maybe try to...
I kind of get a bit curious about how a day of Noah looks like. Do you like some weeks just work insane amount of hours, and then the next week you're like almost completely off because of the nature of working with incident response? Or how does like Google scale that?
Yeah. The incident response at Google is unlike any other company. Like, even when I was at Unit42, I worked with companies that had their own incident response team. Working at Google, the way we do incident response is completely different than I've ever seen before. The way that we do incident response is we have people that are specialized in so back over to the question that was talked about before is like, do you need to be specialized in an application and also know the services, right? This is where Google does that, right? We have people that are specialized in each individual cloud service and each individual application. So when an incident occurs, we bring in the right people that are relevant towards the case. We have an incident manager that leads the top of it, and we work as a group to identify what happened, right? There's a bridge that happens. We all sit on it for 12 hours a day, and we try to figure out what happened. To your point of working long hours, yes. When you get into incident response, you don't expect to have those weekends, right? Or some of these holidays. Things are always on fire. Something is always on. Something is always happening. When you're working at Google, you're one of the biggest targeted companies out there, right? We have a lot of data. So that's where you find yourself working along. A lot of these hours. Man, when you're working on something that's so interesting, these hours just go by so fast. But yeah, it is important to take the step back and have your weekends and have your days off.
How does that work then? Do you then say, for example, to your manager, like, hey, now I've been working in same amount of hours last weeks, I need to be off, and then they don't call you if something is burning? Or how do you like recharge, get back, get some exercise, get some air, go out with your dogs, or like how do you like bring battery back after a hard one?
That's a great question. I mean, there is an on-call rotation as there is with many incident response teams, right? Google is big enough to where the on-call rotation has a lot of people in line, right? So we oftentimes don't have to do the weekends, occasionally here and there, right? The overnights, of course. I mean, people understand people. They realize that they need their time to eat and hang out with their family and their pets, of course, right? So oftentimes what I do is once I get to a good breaking point to where I know I can pick back up from something, I'll stop there, right? As long as I'm not losing my train of thought, I'll stop there. I'll go take a break, whether that may be a couple hours or whether that may be for the night, right? And then pick up back what I need in the morning. the thing to know is when an incident occurs, a lot of times, even when you're working with customer environments, the incident has already happened, right? Of course, your initial triage is to identify if the threat actor is still in the environment, right? If that answer is no, the incident is already done. You can take that time away and perform your analysis within a given amount of time, right? Within a reasonable amount of time. But if the threat actor is not in there and there's not causing a lot more destruction, so you have that breathing time. Now, when the threat actor is in the environment, it's a little bit of a different story, right? Things are really on fire and you're trying to cordon and cut off things as fast as possible. That's where you may lose a little bit of sleep, but you have the trade-offs like any job, right?
That's a fascinating.
I have one last question, Håkon.
Yes, go ahead, Olaf. Go ahead.
How? So on some of the biggest incident response you've been working on, how many people do you is usually handling it? Like, not you can exclude like the internal of the companies, because I guess if you bring those, it could be hundreds. Right. But how many professional incident responders, so to say, is typically working on some of the biggest incidents at the same time?
You know, it's kind of weird. When an incident comes in, there's really only a handful of people that get thrown on the incident. I would say typically around 5, right? But then when we get to some of these larger incidents where it's impacting Google Cloud as a whole, I would say, like, just internally of Google, probably around 20 people. It's really tight-knit, right? These people have been here for a long time. They know the systems in and out. We have the right people on the call that are specialized in the area, so we can really drill down as fast as possible.
Yeah, because that kind of tells me that even if it's a big incident, throwing in 100 people doesn't necessarily help you. It's too many people to handle and manage and to actually help, right? So you would rather have that A team of 10, 20, the best of the best, instead of throwing in every IT guy you find, or...
Yeah, there's a reason the expression of there's too many cooks in the kitchen, right?
Exactly.
Once you add so many people, a lot of people are trying to figure out what's going on and what's happening and what you've already analyzed, and that just slows everything down, right? When you get an incident response, you want as least amount of people as possible focusing on their line and their specialty of work, and that's what we do.
Nice. Thank you, Håkon. I will not ask more questions.
No. Yeah, this used to be your podcast, so you get 3 questions every episode.
I always do 4. I always do 4.
Noah, working at Google is like, they are a frontier of security. You have the threat analysis group, TAG. You have Google Project Zero. You bought Mandiant. Like, there's so many talented people. How is it working in an environment like that?
Yeah, that is, it's crazy, right? It's crazy when you join a company like this and realizing how many talented people there are here. That's why I love this, right? I'm big on cross collaboration, right? Cross team collaboration. So I try to work with as many different groups and try to get them working with as much as possible, right? The amount of data that we get is insane, and you can't really comprehend all of it, right? I think that's where we did a good job of doing like the threat horizons report. Is we like to share this information that we grab from the uppercase team, the tag team, the Project Zero team, our CVR team, our PSE teams, right? All these threat intel teams, and put it into a digestible format for people like you guys, right? People that don't work here, right? But of course, working with these guys, I mean, we have crazy cases, right? Crazy 0 days, crazy APT groups, cross cloud. We're working with some things that you wouldn't believe is possible.
And I guess you can't disclose what that is.
No, unfortunately not. Most of the things
you would have to apply and start working at Google.
Yeah.
Know those details.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're bringing them to your grave.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, most everything that we share is through either our tag team. They have a blog that they post really good research on. Our CVR team, our cloud vulnerability research team, a lot of them post stuff that they find in there. So like our CVR team is very similar to like the Wiz researchers that a lot of people are familiar with. Although we focus on just Google Cloud, they focus on a lot of things that are like almost impossible, but they find a way, right? And then everything that we put in a digestible format for you guys in the Threat Horizons report.
Yeah, I guess also the Google Threat Intelligence, which is like former Mandiant SecOps former Chronicle, right?
Mhm.
And then all the GCP data, then
VirusTotal Pro.
and
VirusTotal,
then you kind of have a combination of a lot of data, insight, and skill sets to actually say some, like not many other companies could do that in my head.
Noah, it's truly been a pleasure. I think we're getting to the point where we should start wrapping up. So this is the point of the episode where you can plug yourself, whatever you're doing, your blog, or if you've been on other podcasts.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having me on the podcast as well. I mean, this has been a pleasure as much as yours is mine. I have a blog out there that teaches how to do Google Cloud Instant Response. It is very similar to a Sans poster. It's very digestible. It's over on Medium. Just look up Noah McDonald on Medium. You'll find the Instant Response poster. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to learn more about how to get to where you want, right? Like if you want to get into Instant Response or into cloud, feel free to message me. The last thing is our Threat Horizons report. I publish that used to be every quarter, but I think now it's every half a year. So be on the lookout for that as well.
Yeah, I can't recommend the Threat Horizons report enough, or your blog. We'll have the link in the down below, as they say on YouTube, in the description. Olav, do you have anything to plug?
Now, if someone wants to check out my blog, the life of
Oh, your vlog.
Yeah. Like 36-year-old, desperate to stay young, bought myself a vlogging camera, and here we go.
Yeah, so go check out Olav's vlog.
Cyber Olav. That's the last time I went to that. Sorry, Håkon.
And as we wrap up, thank you so much, Noah. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Super. Thank you, Noah. Thank you.